On behalf of Beacon House School System, the organizers of Schools of Tomorrow events, I would like to welcome you all to World of Tomorrow, From Darkness to Light, 12th edition of Schools of Tomorrow event, and it is fully virtual. The non-profit Schools of Tomorrow event series was launched by Beacon House School System in 2000 as part of corporate social responsibility and to help inform the direction of organization while also engaging with communities and global societies in getting to shape the future of the schools and the societies. I'm Safia Cassim, Cluster Director North, based in Islamabad, Pakistan. I have been associated with Beacon House School System for the last 9 years, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you today to this live session, Taking Mindfulness into Schools, at the 12th editions of Schools of Tomorrow event. Now, talking about taking mindfulness into schools, research shows that mindfulness skills help improve memory, organization skills, reading, and math score, all while giving students the tools they need to handle the stress and anxiety. To enlighten us on mindfulness, we have with us Mr. Benjamin Decker. He is a social activist, a meditation teacher, and an entrepreneur. He will help us explore mindfulness-based interventions for children and youth, particularly in relation to improve cognitive skills and resilience to stress, to create mindfulness in schools. Our audience are welcome to pose their questions at any time on the screen in front of them where they have an option of questions or comment. We will try to answer as many questions as we can towards the end of the session in the last 10 to 12 minutes. So over to you, welcome Ben, and let's hear from you.
Thank you so much, Safia. I'm so happy to be here. I love the work that Beacon House Schools is doing, and I love the School of Tomorrow events. It's so important for us to always be aware of how today takes us into tomorrow. The way we live today is how we experience tomorrow. The world that we experience tomorrow is created today. So when we think about the schools of tomorrow, and particularly the students, and how we are always students, even when we exit the school system and we become parents or leaders in the community, we're always learning. And so to introduce the mindfulness techniques to a young age to students while they're learning is really introducing a life skill. Like Safia said, my name is Ben Decker. I'm a meditation teacher. I teach all over the world. I'm based in Los Angeles, California, in the United States. I've written 4 books, and I have a number of other books coming. They're all on the topic of mindfulness. The book that I want to refer to as a tool, and I can also make available to everyone for free, the PDF for free, if anyone is interested, I'm happy to share it for free, is this book, Daily Mindfulness, 365 exercises to deepen your practice and find peace. So I can make sure everyone can have that PDF for free if this is helpful. So I know that for me, when I began my formal education as a young child, I was not taught mindfulness in schools. And I remember I had a very hard time paying attention. I had a very hard time retaining the information as it was taught, but I didn't have a hard time learning when I was able to explore. And so what we want to realize as individuals, as teachers, as parents, and as students is that what we want and what we are curious about is a signal, a clue for something that our minds want to learn, our minds want to understand. And so when we go into our lives and we are allowed to explore and we're allowed to research and study and see things that we're interested in, we're more likely to retain that information. We're more likely to have a direct experience that will stay with us longer. And so to be mindful, we think about the mind filling the present moment. Mindfulness is an ongoing paying attention, and it's a skill. oftentimes, too often, in the educational systems, what we find is a culture of punishment, where if a student is not paying attention, they're punished for not paying attention. And it's true, unfortunately, in our home life as well. If a child is not paying attention, sometimes they're punished by their parent for not paying attention. When in reality, it's a skill to be developed. So we have to choose to pay attention. We have to choose to be aware. And we have to cultivate our ability to be sensitive to the thoughts occurring in our own minds and the things that we're experiencing around us. As Safia mentioned, mindfulness is known for improving cognitive capacity, improving memory, and particularly in reading and in math and organizational skills. So we have to realize that what is the purpose of education? What is the purpose of school? Well, it's to prepare ourselves, prepare our students, and prepare the leaders of the future for being functional and effective in this world. We want to be happy. We want to be healthy. We want to improve society. We want to make things better for each other, for ourselves, and for the future generations. And mindfulness is one way we can create a small change in our consciousness that can facilitate those opportunities. Something Safia and I were talking about just before this session is how slowing down, being more present, can actually activate appreciation. Let's take an example. So imagine your favorite sweet, your favorite dessert. Imagine you have a large portion of it and it's just for you. Maybe it's some kind of sweet cake or an ice cream or a pudding or something else. What's your favorite sweet? Imagine that you have a huge portion of that favorite sweet. And we all know that sweets can not always be good for our health, right? Especially in large portions. So imagine just for now that you have a large portion of your favorite dessert and you have a very small spoon. And so you take that spoon and you take one small spoonful and you look at it, you smell it, and you stop thinking about anything else but just that spoonful of that dessert that you just love. Maybe your mother used to make it. Maybe there's a secret recipe that you just love. Your favorite dessert, one small spoonful. And to eat it mindfully would be to experience it, see it, appreciate it, be grateful for it, and then have one small bite. Tasting that one small bite in your mouth. Enjoying that one small bite. Swallowing. And then beginning again. The process is about slowing it all down so that you can really enjoy it. There are chocolate experts all over the world who know the different kinds of chocolate. Maybe there's 5 different kinds of dark chocolate that only a chocolate expert would really notice the difference between. What is the difference between a chocolate expert and someone who's not an expert in chocolate? Well, the chocolate expert is more sensitive to the differences and the textures and the notes and the nuances and the subtleties in the flavor and experience of each kind of chocolate. Similar to a sommelier, an expert on wine, fine wines. Someone who doesn't drink wine, someone who doesn't like wine, may not notice the difference between 2 different kinds of red wine. But a sommelier will be able to describe all of the subtle differences. And that's what mindfulness is. It's a quality that we all have, that we can cultivate and practice so that we can expand our sensitivity and our ability to see the bigger picture all at once. This is so important because when we can understand why we're applying the things that we're learning, when we create a mindful experience, the whole thing becomes more effective. The entire experience becomes more effective. In order to introduce mindfulness into schools, we have to know what mindfulness is. As teachers, as parents, we have to have our own foundational understanding of mindfulness. Mindfulness is the total awareness of what's happening right now in this moment. It's taking the subtleties of the different things that are going on into account so that we can make better decisions. Is that making sense for you guys? Is some of this making sense? Feel free to ask any questions along the way if anything is not making sense. I'd be happy to clarify. Okay, great, thank you. So one of the things that we have to address is, first, we know that there are wonderful benefits to mindfulness in schools. What we need to face head on is the challenges. We have to recognize that there are some certain challenges in incorporating mindfulness into schools, and we need to be aware of them so that we can navigate them intelligently. One of the greatest challenges of mindfulness in schools is a misunderstanding of its religious or spiritual associations. What we need to understand is that there are no religions or spiritual practices required in mindfulness. And it's compatible with all traditions. It has nothing to do with religion. So we have to take that and realize that this is separate from that altogether. Mindfulness can help you in your own spiritual practice, and it can help you in your religion, but mindfulness is not in and of itself spiritual or religious. So let's move on to the next challenge. The next challenge with implementing mindfulness in schools is realizing that it requires actual mindfulness practice by the people bringing it into the schools. So that means the faculty has to have a culture of mindfulness amongst themselves. The faculty and the teachers have to begin to understand mindfulness so that they may mindfully interact with the students. And then when the students are being taught about mindfulness and they're being modeled mindfulness and they're going through mindfulness exercises and practices and experiences, what we need to do is make sure that the parents are also introduced to these same ideas so that the homes that the children are raised in are mindful homes. Taking mindfulness into schools is so much more than bringing in mindfulness exercises and mindfulness curriculum into the schools. It's also about realizing that our children are not isolated beings. They're connected to their brothers and their sisters and their parents and their cousins and their grandparents. And so we have to realize that by bringing mindfulness into the schools, what we're really doing is bringing mindfulness into our homes. And we have to do so intelligently. And that means when we're bringing the mindfulness exercises to the children, no matter what they are, there are thousands of mindfulness exercises that you may choose to bring into your schools. What we need to do is make sure that as we're presenting them, that we present it as practically as possible. We want to practice mindfulness. We don't just want to know mindfulness, we want to become mindful. When we know mindfulness in our heads, we intellectually know the data points. We intellectually understand the concept. But we don't want to just understand the concept. We want to practice it. We want it to come from our heads into our entire bodies so that we can have a subtlety with how we interact with the world, with our body. We want to become mindful drivers when we're driving around. We want to become mindful communicators when we're speaking at the market or at the bank or with other people in our lives, with our family members, those with whom we have relationships. So the idea is that mindfulness must be entrained into the nervous system. We know that our nervous system and our muscles and the cells of the body physiologically have their own memory. And so we must take them through the direct experience of mindfulness so that the cells of the body and the nervous system remembers what it's like to be mindful. So one practice of mindfulness we can do together now, just to bring into the nervous system a sense, a clue, a reminder of what it feels like to be mindful right now. So I invite you to take a moment with me. Take a deep breath in and out. And take a moment to let your body become still while we practice just a moment of mindfulness. I invite you to even close your eyes just for now as you bring your awareness and attention to the breath. Experience the air as it moves into the nostril, down into the lungs, expanding the lungs, expanding the rib cage, expanding the torso, and breathing out. That exhale coming from the lungs out through the mouth or through the nostrils and back in. Experiencing your own breath just for now. And as you do so, allow the muscles in your forehead to relax, continuing to breathe. Experiencing the temperature of the air as you breathe. And now allow the shoulders to also relax as you breathe. Allow the body to be exactly as it is, finding just a moment of stillness, allowing the only movement in the body to be from the breath and the heartbeat. Breathe. Allowing every muscle in the body to relax under its own weight. Observe the part of the body anchored down by gravity. Feel stable there. And now, maintain the awareness on the breath. Allow the body to remain still. And mentally, observe the environment around you. Notice any sounds or movement in all directions around you, behind you, in front of you, to your left, to your right, above you, and below you. And now open your eyes. Part of what we're practicing is scanning the attention in all directions around us. Physiologically, our eyes, our nose, our ears, and our mouth are all right here. And so most of our attention is right here. But when we close our eyes and we relax the body, when we bring our attention into the breath, we then begin to scan all directions around us like a radar scan. And we begin to observe a dog is barking, a car is driving, an airplane is flying. You begin to feel and experience the subtleties of all the data that all of your senses are providing you. You see, our nervous system and our senses are picking up thousands and thousands of data points at every moment. Unconsciously and very subtly, we see thousands of different things. Just take a moment now with your eyes open and look around the room you're in. See all of the different textures and colors and dimensions that you observe just from seeing right now. Our sense of smell also does that. It picks up on many different nuances. Our sense of hearing also does that. It picks up on all different subtle frequencies and little quiet sounds. Our sense of touch does that. The skin all over the body picks up on the temperature of the environment, the movement of the air in the environment, and so on. And so when we practice that moment of mindfulness, we were bringing all of our attention into this moment right now. Oftentimes, We're thinking about where we need to go next, what we want to do, what we used to do, where we used to go, the past or the future. But mindfulness is filling the present moment with our mind, allowing all of our attention to be present as possible right now. And that is an exercise. That's a practice. It's something to strengthen and increase in our capacity and ability to do. And so when we do that, we have more energy right here to access for whatever it is that we are doing. If you're not paying attention, if you're trying to write an email and you're thinking about something else, you may not write the best email. If you're trying to paint a picture and you're thinking about something else, you may not paint the best picture. But when you watch a fine artist and the artist is really close in there and they're painting the details and they're looking at the subtle colors, they're so present with that one little aspect, with each stroke of the paintbrush, that when it comes out, when the final product is, it's completed, it's refined, it's purified, it's improved, it's better than it would have been if it wasn't something that brought a lot of that attention or a lot of that focus in. And so we have to realize that mindfulness is a skill that can be developed and practiced, but it's also a culture that must be introduced. A culture of mindfulness transcends other cultures. Mindfulness transcends regional cultures and inherited cultural norms. So mindfulness is not an American thing. Mindfulness is not a European thing. Mindfulness is not an Asian thing. It's not a Middle Eastern thing. It's not an African thing. It's a human thing. Mindfulness is about all of humanity. And mindfulness is something that's inherent to our being, to being human. We hear things, we see things, we smell things. Mindfulness is about taking all of those senses at once and bringing our thoughts into experience with all of our senses at once, so that something almost magical happens, but it's not magic, it's science. And that magic, that science, that supernatural that almost supernatural thing that happens is an interplay between all of the different aspects of our mind and our emotions and our bodies and our environment. They come into harmony with one another. An immature person will scream and cry to get what they need. A mature person will adjust to the environment to get what their needs are. So we say a child demands that the environment change for them, but an adult changes to become what the environment needs. So think about that. At what point in our lives do we begin to psychologically mature? The sooner the better, am I right? We all have the part of our minds that knows better. We all have a conscience. We all have the ability to make better decisions. And so what we want to do is learn from our mistakes and the mistakes of others sooner and more quickly. Take a moment, especially the adults, but everyone, take a moment and consider, what are the areas in your life where there are sometimes mistakes that you make? Maybe sometimes you overeat, or maybe sometimes you lie, or maybe sometimes you can be impatient. Maybe sometimes you procrastinate. All of those things represent when you are doing something that you know better. And it's normal. We all do things that we know better. And so mindfulness has a premise that it comes with. It recognizes that sometimes we do things that we know aren't the right thing to do. So there are two aspects of our inner nature. And in the United States, the indigenous people of the United States have an expression And they say that there are two wolves inside. And I've also heard it to say two lions inside of ourselves. One is greed and selfishness and manipulation, and the other is generosity and patience and compassion. Which one will survive? The one that you feed. So we must cultivate our altruism. We must feed our altruism. We must feed our compassion. We must feed mindful communication. We must feed sensitivity, intelligence, nobility. We have to feed those things in ourselves and in our children, in our schools, in our faculty, and even in our parents. Our homes must be places of nobility. Our homes must be places of organization. Safia mentioned at the very beginning of this call that mindfulness, among other things, helps with organizational skills. Now think about that. Think about how much, especially when you go into the world and you start to have to deal with balancing your finances, when you have to begin to navigate social challenges, when there are cultural and social challenges that you have to face, decisions that you have to make, purchases that you have to make, decisions about your home and family that have to be made. These are things that require a lot of energy, and they can be some of the hardest, most challenging decisions in the world. All of us know that to be born into this world is to be set up on a course where many, many challenges will be before us. So what we want to do is prepare our children to face those challenges with strength, confidence, and courtesy. And that's what mindfulness is. Mindfulness allows us to understand what we really know so that we may be noble, so that we may be dignified, so that we may be refined in our interactions with one another. So I want to make sure that when we're talking about mindfulness, we're not just talking about meditation. We're talking about our relationships with each other. We're talking about our relationships with food, with water, with our self-care. Mindfulness, when it's introduced as a concept, it permeates all areas of our lives. And so that's why this is so crucial. A mindful exploration of the world, mindfulness as a skill set, as an ability, cultivated, introduced, and developed from a young age, can help expand and create new possibilities that we don't even know about. So many of us aren't even exposed to mindfulness till our 30s or 40s or even never in our lives. And so if we can make sure to make that introduction earlier and allow those children with the bright minds, that pure innocence that comes from those young minds, if we can allow that mindfulness to cultivate from that early place, we don't even know what will happen. What we do know is that organization will come through, that compassion will come through, that better communication will come through. And once we begin to visualize and imagine multiple generations of mindfulness, that's where the rubber really meets the road. When we think about the United Nations and the Sustainable Development Goals, we realize that there are extraordinarily immense challenges that we face together. Things like poverty, gender inequality, climate change, environmental destruction, all different kinds of things, wars and misunderstandings between nations and tribes and communities. All of these things can slowly and gradually, and sometimes quickly, be ameliorated and transformed through mindfulness. And when we bring it into the schools, that education that you provide becomes more important and more intact. It deepens the student's ability to understand the bigger picture, the greater, more important information to what you're being taught. Think about what this means, that reading, math, and memory recall, and organization are all improved through mindfulness. Now imagine all those areas in your home that are disorganized. Think about maybe you have disorganized closets, or your kitchen cupboards are disorganized, or maybe your bank account is a little disorganized. Maybe how you manage your finances is disorganized. Maybe how you do your laundry or your home or your chores around the home isn't perfectly organized. What happens when we increase memory recall, mindfulness, and organization all at once is we increase efficiency. And efficiency in our lives means you can do everything better. You can navigate your financial challenges better. You can improve your health, strengthen your immune system, have a more beautiful, more organized, more comfortable home. And everything that you do is infused with the consciousness with which you do it. And so what we want to do is support ourselves and each other by raising our consciousness, expanding our consciousness, expanding our awareness so that we can make better decisions. If we don't understand the big picture, we won't be able to make big picture decisions. If we don't see things as they really are, we're not going to be able to make decisions from a place of wisdom and intelligence. We all have that lower nature and that higher nature. The higher nature is the part of you that says, be kind right now, be patient right now, be wise right now. The lower nature is the part of you that says, overeating is just fine right now. The lower nature is more automatic. The lower nature is associated with our animal nature. And so when we think about mindfulness, we're also realizing that our bodies are biological animal creatures that have an X factor, have an extra quality to them that is supernatural, that's divine, that's cosmic, that's global. No matter what nation or culture you were born into, you are a global creature. You're from a global family. No matter what our skin looks like, no matter what our language looks like, no matter what our food is, no matter what region you were born in, we are one human family. We are one people that lives on this planet, our home planet. And so our relationship to each other and the planet begins to transform when we begin to open our minds. And it's not about an indoctrination into mindfulness. We're not indoctrinating a new ideology or a new concept. What we are doing is allowing your own nature to mature, to grow, to come into itself. Imagine that we are able to, at a young age, cultivate and maintain our purity and our innocence and develop maturity simultaneously. There are certain things that we learn that only happen through challenges. There's something that you learn having your heart broken, that you can only learn through having your heart broken. There's something that you learn through the death of a loved one, that you only learn through the grief of experiencing the death of a loved one. And there are things that you learn only through having gone through a challenge. And when you're introduced to mindfulness, we create moments where you learn something, where we challenge ourselves to slow down in a moment when we want to rapidly move through something. We challenge ourselves to become very, very present when really we want to allow our mind to wander. We want to think about this and think about that. We want to run there and do this and do that. When we practice mindfulness, we begin to override some of those automatic trigger reactions. And so one of the things that we take into the awareness of mindfulness, one of the things that each of us should take with us even today, is the difference between reacting to something. Think about like a chemical reaction. You have vinegar, you put baking soda in it, and it bubbles up. It's an automatic, immediate reaction. It's a chemical reaction. So think about when someone says something to you that bothers you or makes you uncomfortable. You have a reaction. Maybe you get triggered. Maybe you become defensive. Maybe you become angry. Or maybe you become sad or upset or insecure. Imagine those reactions. Those are almost like chemical reactions where the nervous system, in the presence of experiencing something, has an immediate, automatic, almost electrical reaction to whatever's happening. And through mindfulness, we cultivate the ability to self-observe. And we can observe that automatic reaction. And the automatic reaction there is the recognition that something automatic took place and you have the ability to consciously override it. Someone just asked, how can we bring mindfulness in schools? Bringing mindfulness in schools is based on you understanding what mindfulness is. So it's about you listening and realizing that you don't already understand mindfulness, and that in order to bring it into schools, you have to first understand what you're even talking about, because it's not what you think it is. You have to deepen your relationship to the actual idea, the actual understanding, the actual reality. Mindfulness cannot come into schools because you introduce a curriculum into the schools. Mindfulness cannot come into the schools because you introduce an exercise into the schools. Mindfulness must come into the schools through you learning what mindfulness is, and you beginning to experience it and understand it, so those exercises you introduce into the schools can be helpful. One of the greatest challenges in bringing mindfulness into schools is that we want the quick fix. We want the answer. We want you to just give it to us. And that's not how this universe works. The reality of this universe is that there are greater challenges than anyone has ever solved. And so you have to realize that you need to take your own moment and practice mindfulness so that it can transmit energetically from you to your students, and from the students amongst each other and within the home as well. One of the greatest ways to do that is the diversity of exercises to take with you into the students. A number of American schools are using my book, Daily Mindfulness, to introduce mindfulness exercises each day. It's set up like a calendar, and one of the best ways, and it's designed for schools. So it's not necessarily the only way to bring mindfulness into schools, but it is one of the greatest ways to have a full set of 365 different exercises to bring into schools, because each exercise will exercise one facet of mindfulness, but we need a multifaceted, multi-dimensional understanding of everything so that we can have a more complete experience with it. So one way is to begin each class with just a moment of becoming totally present. A few minutes ago, earlier, when we did the exercise of relaxing the body, closing the eyes, and mentally scanning the environment in all directions around us, that exercise was an exercise in acceptance, accepting the moment as it is. Imagine that a student is distracted. Imagine that students are all having to observe the classes virtually. And so some students have brothers and sisters in the room distracting them. Some students have construction going on next door distracting them. Other students have pets in the home distracting them. What we want to do is cultivate the ability to pay attention to what's happening regardless of the distractions. It's not that I don't know that a dog is barking. It's that I'm choosing to be totally present here regardless of the dog barking. And so how we cultivate that, how we practice it and introduce it into schools, is by holding a space of recognizing that each of us is in a different situation. And so by beginning a class with a moment of silence and a moment of setting an intention and scanning the environment and all the different things happening in the environment, we set the stage for a more effective class. And now the next thing is remembering that throughout the curriculum that you're training, you must understand mindfulness so that you can begin to use your own creativity to communicate whatever you're teaching the students. So if you're a math teacher or a reading teacher or a foreign language teacher, mindfulness is something you must really understand within your own body so that you can make those really, really good decisions about what the specific curriculum is that needs to be taught, so that mindfulness can be used as a tool to deepen the understanding of the foreign language, to deepen the understanding even in physical education. So physical exercise, physical education, obesity, diabetes, heart disease, many different issues that are the leading causes of death worldwide are related to poor relationship to the body, poor diet, poor exercise, poor nutrition. Some of those things are circumstantial, but when it comes to the mind-body relationship, you can take better care of your body than you do right now. We always have the ability to do just a little bit better. And so the introduction of mindfulness is an experience in the nervous system. Okay, we want a mind-body connection. So why don't I read a couple example exercises so you can begin to see what some of these exercises you can introduce to your students could actually be. And so now pay attention. You may be able to have 5 minutes, and only 5 minutes with your student. And sometimes maybe you have 45 minutes with your student to practice mindfulness. And so these can be done a lot of different ways. I'm going to just flip through and choose something. One practice is a body scan. And so I'm going to do a little example. I'm going to do a quick example of this. A body scan meditation is when you close your eyes. It's a mindfulness exercise to close your eyes and you gradually bring your awareness to different parts of the body. Just like we did a moment ago when I said relax the muscles in your forehead. Relax the muscles in your shoulders. Most people did not realize that they had tension in their forehead or they had tension in their shoulders. But when we relax them, we become more aware of when that tension comes back. So the body scan exercise is one where we say, okay, bring your awareness to your forehead. Relax the forehead. Now bring the awareness to the shoulders. Relax the shoulders. Now bring the awareness to the jaw. Relax the jaw. Bring the awareness to the torso. Relax the torso. Bring the awareness to the hips, thighs, and legs. Relax them all. Relax the arms and hands and feet. Observe the body. Observe the subtle experiences in the body. You see, each of these little exercises are so subtle that if you don't know what you're talking about, you're going to think that you're going to miss it. If you don't know what you're talking about, you're going to miss it. If you don't know what mindfulness is, you're going to think that it's something that can be injected into schools. It can't be injected. It must be brought in from a mindful person, a person who chooses to understand mindfulness, who is patient with mindfulness, must come in. Look, I've taught hundreds of thousands of people to practice mindfulness. 99% of them think they already know what mindfulness is, and 99% of them are wrong. So the idea is that we have to cultivate a subtle sensitivity within our own bodies. How do we do that for our students? Mindful eating exercises. One of the most common mindful eating exercises is to look at a raisin. Take a small raisin and look at that raisin. Observe it. Allow every part of the body to relax and all of your attention going into observing the raisin, the wrinkles, the texture, the smell, feeling it in your hand. Before you even bring it into your mouth, rub the raisin on your lip. Feel it on your lip. Put the raisin in your mouth. Feel the raisin on your tongue. Before you break the skin of the raisin and you feel the sweetness of the sugars from inside the raisin fill your mouth, the flavor fill your mouth. All of these things are about slowing down our experience of time. Freezing time in the timeline of experiencing the raisin, of doing the mental body scan, of listening to the moment. Mindful listening exercises. There's a number of different mindful listening exercises here in the book that I can give you for free. And reminder, I can give you this PDF for free. I want you to just have access to these exercises. Another way that we can bring mindfulness into schools is through mind-body coordination, left and right sides of the body, hemispheric harmonization. And so one thing that we'll sometimes do is blink one eye and squeeze the opposite fist. These kinds of exercises require mental attention in the body. And so it infuses all your attention into the body. You can't think of something else when you're here focusing on these things that you're actually doing. And so the thing is, look, here's how to bring mindfulness in schools. Here's how to take mindfulness into schools. It means you as a student or as a teacher or as a faculty member or as a parent needs to realize that it's your responsibility to become more mindful. When you become more mindful and you begin understanding mindfulness, the first person who will benefit from that is you. You learning about mindfulness and understanding and implementing these gradual practices for maybe just even 5 minutes, you will begin to experience the benefits of being more patient, more calm, more happy, more healthy, more at peace, more relaxed, and even more joyful, more grateful. When you can practice those things, you can hold a field around you that's more peaceful, more patient, more mindful. And so the best way to bring that mindfulness into schools is through implementing a broad range of small exercises into everything else that you're doing in your curriculum, applying mindfulness to the existing curriculum through a number of different subtle, different exercises, a diversity of exercises. Thank you guys so much. I'd love to take some questions and process through questions if you have any. So Safia is going to come back now.
Hi, Ben. It was very interesting and enlightening. So, Beck, there is a question. Ben, there's a question for you here, and one of the questions says that when you say that mindfulness is to be practiced, there are a lot of people who can't very easily do it because it's actually a connection between your conscious mind and an unconscious mind. So, what do you suggest to people to make how they can make a connection between the conscious mind and the unconscious mind?
That's a great question. One of the easiest ways to start is, first of all, realizing that your conscious mind and your unconscious mind want to be connected. So just realize that it's natural for them to be connected. And so you realize that there's a momentum, a natural momentum that will bring them together. So you're supported by your own nature. The next thing is to simply breathe. We call it a box breath because there's 4 sides to it. And you breathe in, hold it, and out. Hold it. It sounds very simple, but just breathing in for 5 counts, holding it for 5 counts, and out for 5 counts, and then holding it out for 5 counts, begins to regulate the relationship between the mind and body. And the body is where the unconscious data, the unconscious mind lives within the body. So when you bring that conscious body-mind connection to each other, even just by coordinating the mind and the breath, by doing we sometimes call it a 5-5-5-5 breath.
Okay.
You start to open up those pathways between the body and the mind, and the body-mind, conscious-unconscious connection starts to gradually feel safer connecting. It becomes more natural and more comfortable to connect. Because the reason we don't have the connection between the conscious and the unconscious mind is because of constant stimulation, where we're seeing things on our phones that are very different than what our body is experiencing. So the unconscious and conscious mind become fractured and separate from one another. And so by doing the 5-5-5-5 breath, we begin to easily and slowly bring our mind and body back together.
So you mean that it is actually an effort that has to be made and a belief that our unconscious wants to meet the conscious. So
Exactly.
that okay. So what you have explained just now, there's another question which is linked to the same question, And it says that multitasking is something extremely common these days, and you find people doing a lot of things at the same time. So, do you want to say this, that if you move towards mindfulness, does it mean that you are encouraging people to do lesser things per day?
Not per day, but at a time. So per moment. So to
Yeah.
do less things per moment, but not necessarily per day, because time is a dimension of consciousness, which means, of course, that time, we have an expression in English, time flies when you're having fun, which means time goes by when you love what you're doing. If you're with someone that you think is just so fun and beautiful and loving and sweet, time flies. But if you're with someone who is like frustrating and drives you crazy, 1 minute can feel like 1 hour. And so when we're very mindful, we enter into a space where we do one thing at a time. And studies also show, by the way, it should be known that studies show that multitasking makes you less productive. You think you're being more productive, but because your mind has to do multiple things at once, it's less efficient. So we want to do a lot in every day. All of us do, right? We love being productive. But to be productive sometimes means doing one thing at a time.
Yeah.
I have something to ask, an example that will make more sense to women than to men, but it's a good example. If you're doing your eyeshadow and you're doing your eye makeup and you're thinking about something else, are you going to do a perfect job on your eye makeup?
It's a
No.
blunder. It's going to be a blunder.
Yeah, it's going to be messy. Yeah. So you have to pay close attention to exactly what you're doing because the details matter. And if you pay really close attention, you don't necessarily need to spend a lot of time on that one task. It's a matter of just simply taking a deep breath, switching from this task to that task, switching gears, doing your lips, then doing your eyes, taking a moment to switch between tasks.
All right.
Imagine trying to do your eye and your lip at the same time. It'd be messy.
Okay. All right. So there's another question for you. And the question says that does being mindfulness mean that you will make lesser mistakes?
Yes. Yes, because there's a bunch of mistakes. There's a whole category of mistakes that happen because we're being careless. We weren't thinking the whole situation through, And so when you take just that moment, we talked about being reactive. The opposite of being reactive is being responsive. Imagine being responsible, able to respond, to be responsible versus being reactive. A responsible person versus a reactive person is someone who takes a moment to consider the consequences of their actions. How will this affect the environment? How will these words affect what I'm about to affect the students? How will this behavior affect my friend or my peer? And so therefore we're more likely to be more kind with the words that we say. We're therefore more likely to avoid silly mistakes and be more present with ourselves. We often make mistakes that we already knew the right thing, and so we do something that we weren't paying attention to, we weren't thinking, so we will make fewer mistakes the more mindful we are. We still make mistakes, but definitely fewer.
All right, thank you. Okay, there's another question here. I believe it's from one of the teachers. She's asking that is mindfulness required to be taught as a separate subject, or it has to be taught as a practice and then it can be integrated into different subjects?
That's a wonderful question. I think that the best way is really both. To create, one of the things that we did at a private high school in Los Angeles is that we did assemblies for the entire school on mindfulness. And we did a 3-point process. One, we did large assemblies with all 500 students of the school. And we did a training on mindfulness with a presentation, projection, interaction, questions from the students, the entire student body exposed to a training in mindfulness. That's one aspect. The second aspect was training all the teachers of all the different subjects of mindfulness so that the teachers can integrate it intelligently into their specific curriculum to help their students perform better in their classes. And then the third thing we did was implement a mindfulness club. So some students may elect to be in a small group that has more of an ongoing study. So then you have a certain percentage of the students that are going deeper into the mindfulness study, where as well as all students having a basic introduction and all faculty members implementing mindfulness in the ways that make the most sense to them for their students and their curriculum and content.
Okay, thank you very much. And Ben, I think the example that you gave for ladies about eye makeup, now I can understand why I've always found it very, very calming, and it helps as a therapy also a lot of times. Yes. So, yeah, and I think to conclude what all you've said, if I have to conclude it in one statement, in one sentence, I would say that mindfulness is actually feeling power of the present moment, to own that moment. That is the most important part. I think learning to own the moment is very important, and also to learn the difference between the lower nature and the upper nature that you've talked about is amazing. And mindfulness is basically a focus within a paradigm. And while encompassing parameters that are there, what all your aims are and what all your objectives are. So thank you very much. Would you like to send in any message, or would you like to conclude it? We have last 2 minutes. You're welcome to, give any message or anything that you want to say.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I think the way that you described it is perfect. And like you said, I'm doing Make of You Find It Relaxing. It is essentially like a mindfulness exercise. One way that can be implemented in schools is coloring. So coloring, especially for younger students, but even for adults, coloring within the lines, being mindful, color choices and things like that. It's very, very relaxing. I would just love to say, congratulations to all of you. The world is in a crazy moment right now, and you are learning, you're doing the right thing, you're helping people learn. This is the most important thing anyone in the entire world could be doing right now, and you are doing it. So thank you so much for doing that.
Most welcome. So the lesson you take, I
also just wanted to say this book, Daily Mindfulness, has 365 mindfulness exercises. And I want to make it available. I want to give the PDF for free to anyone. So I'll send that to you, Safia, and we can figure out how to get it to anyone who wants it so they can implement the mindfulness exercises in their lives and with students.
Okay, thank you. So today we learned that there's a lot of power in the moment, and we must learn to own the moment. Thank you very much, Ben. Have a nice. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much.